So today we're going to go over kind of a new way to get that film look in your digital photography. So welcome back. I'm in the black box, as I like to call it, editing suite. Trust me, I think you're going to want to stick around for this one. It's pretty cool. It's got a lot of cool features and gives you a lot of control and flexibility to get the exact kind of look that you want for your digital in film. So before we get into that, head over to the website. I've uploaded a bunch of new lenses, cameras, gear, all that kind of stuff. Some OM1s, OM2s, Prima Plan up there, some Konica glass at a good price, some Nikon glass, a bunch of different camera bodies. I think there's a Kiev on there. So there's a lot of cool new gear on the website to check out. Also be sure to subscribe to the newsletter on there. There might be some cool stuff coming up where I do some free film development or some giveaways and things like that. I'm working with a few very smart people on some cool projects. Film developing, etc. might be in the works as well. So if you're interested in winning some free stuff like that or some major discounts, if we get started into that route with some other things I got going on, be sure to head over to the website and subscribe to that email list. I'm not going to spam you, but if you want some special deals and discounts, it's going to go that route just to avoid some spam and things like that with YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to that email list. Okay, so if you're like me, you shoot a lot of digital alongside your film photography work. Why? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. Digital just makes sense. It's cheaper. It can be quicker. It can be more efficient. It's more practical for professional work. There's a lot less that can go wrong in your digital work when compared to film. And there are a lot of projects where maybe I don't want the film look. But then there's definitely a lot of times where, whether I'm doing headshots or couple shoots, I'm not sure I'm doing much anymore, or wedding photography is a big one I used to do. Whenever I had the couple's portraits, or maybe the first look with the bride and her dad, or maybe a very emotional moment, I wanted to kind of bring in that film look to those images to give them a little bit more life and make them feel a little bit more real. A bunch of different ways you can do that. Of course, you can go the route of getting different LUTs and presets from different YouTubers and photographers. I'm pretty sure every app has 20 different lens flare filters you can add onto your image, as well as different grain textures with dust and all that kind of stuff. But all those end up being pretty much the same, and you're just kind of overlaying the image on top of your image. It doesn't really kind of form to that specific image that you're working on. It kind of just gives you a plain, basic slate just slapped on top of the image, and it pretty much looks the same across no matter what image you put it on. Now you can go into Lightroom and you can add grain, yeah. You can adjust your colors and tweaks, things like that. A program I used to use a lot, back when I did weddings a lot more, was Visco. So the Visco presets, I just pop right into Lightroom and I could pop those onto any of my images to get more of that film look. And they did a great job. They had a great look with different grain. You could do, if I wanted to increase grain, I could do, Portrait 400 and there'd be a plus bar and then maybe plus if I really wanted to amp up the grain. You don't have access to changing the size, the texture, the highlights, the shadows, any of that stuff. And grain is just one aspect of film photography. So I was approached to try out this new software, and I was a little unsure at first, but after playing with it, doing my research, spent the past month playing with it, tweaking with it, and I am just really excited about using this in my work on a much broader scale. Now, before we get started, I'm going to show you a set of images. Luckily, when I travel a lot, usually I'll take film and then I'll either take a digital right by it, compare and contrast, and just have it as a backup in case a lot of times. Apologize for the voice in advance, been a little sick lately, so bear with me today. So what I've done is I've taken this software and I've taken the digital image and I've edited it to make it look as close as I can to the film version of that image. And I want to see if you can tell which one is the film image and which one is the digital image. Comments below, let me know how many you got right. I am curious. There are some that personally I think are easier than others, and we'll go into why I think that is after we look at these images. So here are these 12 images. Let me know which ones you get right. Be sure to comment down below with what you think of the software we're about to talk about, as well as how many of those images you got correct. What we're going to be looking at is a plugin for Lightroom called Dehancer Pro. So if that sounds familiar to you, the reason why is because Dehancer has a plugin for DaVinci Resolve to get your video to look more like film as well. Now, they did send me the software to look at. They have no input or say in this video. I'm not getting paid any way, shape, or form, but I was very intrigued when they said it was a film plugin for Lightroom, because that's something I felt that's been lacking in the work that I want to look more like film. I did also have them give me access to their DaVinci Resolve plugin, which I wish I had used a long time ago, because after using it, I absolutely love the look. I love how it renders it. I love the flexibility and control you have over how much of that look you get in a lot of aspects. And I also wanted to compare it to their Lightroom plugin to see if it's kind of the same process, the same workflow, and gives the same consistency across both platforms. And I'm happy to say that it absolutely does. So I'm very, very happy with how they were able to transfer that software from DaVinci and put that plugin into Lightroom. Now, once you download it and install it, all you're going to do is, if you go to your images, you're just going to right click on the image you want to edit and go down to Edit in Dehancer Lightroom plugin. And you're just going to click that, and it's going to bring you into Dehancer. Before you do that, make sure everything else is set up how you want. Your exposure, your temperature, all your colors, make sure they're how you want them, because it's going to be kind of like Photoshop. It's going to take like a TIFF copy and bring it into a Dehancer plugin. So if it's not where you want to before you go into Dehancer, you're going to have to cancel, remove the image from your Lightroom catalog, and then change it to where you want it and kind of go back into Dehancer again. You can, of course, make some adjustments once you're done back in Lightroom, but I prefer to make all those changes with the raw image in Lightroom before I go into Dehancer. So we're going to right click, Edit in Dehancer Lightroom plugin. As you can see, it says Edit Copy with Lightroom Adjustments. Yes, edit. So here is the image in Dehancer. Now, this is where it comes into where I was telling you I think some of these images are going to be easier to tell than others. It's because of this left side box. Now, these are all the film presets. So if you click the settings bar here, you can see Update Film Profiles, which to me says they're going to continually add to these profiles, which is fantastic, because there's some common ones that I didn't see in here. Granted, they wouldn't be my first picks to kind of put onto an image, but they are ones that I shot with these images. So for example, my black and whites, I'm pretty sure all of them were Team-X or Tri-X. And then I think a lot of my color, Kodak Gold, Kodak Portra, and then some Fuji Color and Provia 400, but they don't have all of them in there. They have the more popular, well-known, so they have Ilford, they have your Fuji colors, and you can just scroll down this list, your Kodaks, you can search. So another interesting one they have in here is Lomography Purple, which I find rather interesting because it's a very new kind of experimental film. I'm hoping they continue down that road and maybe do some other Lomo films like maybe Lomo 800, which has a very cool, unique look. I'm sure I'll end up sticking with, the Ilfords and the Fujis and the Kodaks, things like that. But it is kind of cool and kind of nice to have that flexibility and have those options readily available. So after we've picked on the left-hand side here, let's do, let's do Fuji Color Natura 1600. So there is your original. This is basically like putting a preset on in Lightroom, and that's kind of what you get with, and then you can make some tweaks, but you're kind of stuck there. The great part is over here on the right-hand side. From here, you have temperature control. So if you want to up the temperature, you can drop it, make it much more cooler. I like it kind of even right there. You can control the tint. So it's green or more magenta, very similar to the Lightroom, nothing fancy yet. Defringe, you can adjust that there. And then I can just minimize this bar. If I don't like those edits, I can just remove it, but I'm going to leave that on. Expand, so this is for if you want your blacks really blacks or your whites very white. So I can up my whites here, which I'm going to do just a little bit. Blacks, I'm going to bring those up a bit. Also, I forgot to mention, you even have push-pull over here, which is great. So you can push or pull by up to 2 stops either way. Love that. But if I want maybe a little bit more faded black look, I can go in here, I can up the blacks there, and that kind of drops the blacks a little bit more faded, not so harsh. Print, this is great. You can make adjustments if you wanted to print, whether it be, I haven't tweaked much with this, but it's nice to kind of have that if you're going to print straight up. Gives you a little bit more control to make sure it looks good on paper and kind of looks exactly how you want it to look when it's on your screen. So minimize that. Next, film grain. Here's where we start to get some of the cooler features I was talking about. So before, like I said, in Lightroom or anything else, you can apply grain. It applies it to the whole image. You can adjust the size and you can adjust the amount of grain, and that's kind of it. This is so much better. So here I can adjust the size of grain, okay, standard there. I can adjust the amount, I can adjust the resolution. So if I want a really fine grain or I want a really dirty grain that kind of cuts down on the clarity and contrast and sharpness of the image. And then now I can adjust the grain in each section. So highlights, I don't like how it looks in the highlights there, it's a little bit too much. I don't like the midtones here in the middle along this aisle. Along this line here, I can drop that down. See, it gets much smaller, much more fine. I'm going to adjust the amount of grain to turn that down. But maybe I want a lot more grain in the shadows here, which wouldn't be, you know, untypical of film. So for these shadows, maybe I want to bump up the grain there. And you can see I'm starting to get a lot more grain, a lot more texture in the shadows, but my highlights are still clean. My highlights are still crisp. My midtones haven't completely lost those either. And so I have control over each category on what that grain looks like. Color, I found, doesn't do a whole lot. From the images that I've personally played with so far. Again, a lot of this is going to depend on the image. You know, if you have a really dark image overall, you're not going to see these transitions and highlights and things like that, which is why it's so important to have individual control like this so you can change it according to what images you're editing. Color head, this is kind of like your curves. I can go in here and just tweak whichever one I want to get it more blue, more yellow, which can be pretty useful. It's nice to be able to kind of make those adjustments later on and not just in Lightroom. Halation. This is a big part of film. If you're shooting into a bright sky, you know those sharp lines, you're going to have a red kind of a line or a blue or green line. It happens a lot with older vintage lenses or with old cameras. It's just too contrasty, even with digital cameras. So for instance, along these ridges, I might get some halation there, local diffusion. And so if you're not seeing this at all, you can start to see it a little bit there. But if I do mask mode, you can see right along that ridge, that's the halation that we got going on here. So this particular image wouldn't necessarily have halation because of the clouds and overcast, but you can see here where it would be if it did have it, and you can adjust the amount. You can see it's got that red right there. I'm not going to use it for this specific image, but you can see how that would apply in other different scenarios. Bloom, now this one would apply. Bloom is also a great tool. You can do mask mode here as well. You can see along that whole ridge line, it has that bloom. I can adjust the diffusion. I'm going to diffuse it more, and I can amplify it or tone it down. The details, maybe I want less details. The source limiter, I don't want a whole lot in there. The highlights, you know, I'm going to put it right about there is good. And once I'm done, I can just take off that mask and you can see where it lines up. Let's turn the halation off there. And this is with, this is without. So you can see that does give a very natural film look to this image. So last, you have control over vignetting, which I don't really use a whole lot for this kind of stuff. So I usually just leave that off. Once you're done, you can click OK, and boom, your image is back in Lightroom. So if I wanted to go back in here, I can go back in and make any adjustments I want to now that it's in Lightroom. But again, this is no longer a raw file, so it's going to have a lot more drastic of an effect. So that is a quick look at Dehancer Pro. It's a very simple, quick, easy to use plugin that you just pop right into Lightroom. It's also available for Photoshop, which is great. So if you're one of those people who likes to go more in depth in Photoshop, personally, that's not me. I try and do most of my work in Lightroom. You can have that same plugin for Photoshop as well. So I will leave the link for this in the description below. Again, highly recommend it. It's fantastic. I love it. I'm definitely going to be using it a lot more. If you have any questions or thoughts about it, leave those in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Love to hear your thoughts on this plugin, or if there's other plugins maybe that you use besides this. Be sure to subscribe if you're not. Like this video if you find it useful, and make sure you comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are. Okay guys, so that's going to wrap up this one. I will see you in the next video.